Have you ever worked somewhere that said it valued communication, but only certain voices seemed to ever really be heard? Where open dialogue meant agreeing with leadership. Well, Stanley Deetz would say that not only is this bad management, but it's actually a much deeper issue of power and control. And of course, we have a theory for it. Welcome to the critical theory for communication in organizations. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Communication Campus. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Malynnda Stewart. And in today's episode, we're exploring Stanley Deetz's critical theory of communication in organizations, a framework that asks tough questions about how communication can liberate or limit the voices we hear at work. Now, most traditional organizational theories, from classical to a systems approach, assume organizations exist to be efficient and productive. Deetz, who is a critical scholar, challenges that assumption. He argues that organizations are also sites of domination, where communication can reproduce or resist power. In other words, communication doesn't just transmit messages, it can shape who gets to speak, whose interests are being served, and how decisions are actually justified. Now, there are two critical goals in this theory. The first is to explore unjust power structures hidden in everyday organizational communication. The second is to create a more democratic workplace where all members can meaningfully participate. This approach doesn't reject organizations, but what it does do is it reimagines them as spaces where communication should enable participation, not silence. Now, Deetz described four major ways that corporations often distort communication and limit participation. First, we have strategy. Management controls the communication and uses that control to maintain power. So, for example, the open door policies that punish dissent. We have consent and the idea that employees willingly adopt managerial values on their own. For example, we're like a family here, even when that leads to overwork and underpaid and not really feeling like mom and dad are going to listen to you. We have involvement. Employees are invited to share opinions, but they can't really influence actual decisions. Surveys and meetings really don't change much about the outcomes because those in power ultimately decide what happens. Then we have participation, true collaboration, where power and voices are shared. Now, this is going to be where employees have real input in shaping policies and practices. But we've got to create a culture where we feel that we can participate. Only through participation, not strategy or manipulation, can organizations become truly communicative and just. Now, the critical theory of communication challenges us to think beyond efficiency. It asks who benefits from the way communication is happening here, who gets to speak, and who is silenced. For leaders, consultants, and employees alike, this theory is a great reminder that good communication isn't just clear, it's fair. Okay, so to sum this episode up, this is a quick one because I think if you've understood some of the critical theories that we've talked about before, this just makes sense. But as always, if you need additional information, just drop me a line in the comments and I will explain and explore even more. So we have communication that is both reflecting and reproducing power here. Deetz urges us to move from control and consent to true participation. Ethical organizations are going to use communication to empower their employees, not to dominate them. Thanks for joining me in this episode of Communication Campus. Our next section, we're going to be diving quite a bit more into the ideas of cultural communication and all of the different ways that cultures influence the way that we communicate. There's so much more here to talk about in terms of power and emotion and connection in our everyday relationships. Until then, remember, communication isn't neutral. It's the foundation of justice, especially in organizational life. So be thoughtful of what you say and keep communicating.